Hi, thanks for watching. My name is Jessie. I'm going to be reviewing A Short Walk Through a Wide World by Douglas Westerbeke. Thank you to Simon & Schuster for providing an ARC of this book. This book follows Aubrey Torval, starting from when she's 9 years old in the 1800s, and she finds a puzzle ball in the yard of somebody who has just passed away. I believe she was on her way to school when she finds it, and she kind of kicks it down the road for a little bit and eventually leaves it in another yard. The ball keeps finding its way back to her, and she throws it over a fence, and when she gets home, the ball is in her backpack. And she becomes kind of intrigued / obsessed with this puzzle ball. And one day, her and her two sisters go to a well and decide that for the greater good, they are going to wish for altruistic things. So to cure somebody who's sick, etc., etc. And in order to get this wish granted, they think that they need to give the well one of their most prized possessions. They all go home and they get one of their most prized possessions, and Aubrey brings the puzzle ball with her with the alleged intent of throwing it into the well. But when the other two sisters throw their possessions into the well, Aubrey kind of hugs the ball and steps back, and she doesn't want to throw it in there. And she ends up running away from the situation and going home and just kind of forgetting the whole thing ever happened. Well, that night at dinner, she starts bleeding from her nose, and her bones start twisting and contorting. Her parents take her to a doctor, and as she gets further away from her house, the symptoms start to lessen. So the doctor doesn't really find anything to base a decision off of, and so they take her back home. Well, as they get closer to home, the symptoms show back up, and it turns out that she can't stay in the same place for too long. So she starts moving. At first it's from street to street, neighborhood to neighborhood, going towards the outskirts of the city that they live in. And her family is going with her. And this goes on for a while as they get farther and farther away from home, but eventually the father takes the two other sisters back home to continue their lives. They have to go to school, he has to work, and the mother stays with Aubrey for a little while longer. Aubrey eventually comes to the decision that she doesn't want her mother to suffer with her, and so while her mother is sleeping at a hotel, she takes off and leaves her mother there. The story, first of all, it's a magical realism book, and that is one of my most favorite genres. It's also one of, I think, the hardest to really pin down when you're trying to explain what's happening without sounding absolutely nutty. So in this book, after Aubrey leaves her mom, she finds a hidden doorway. It's in the shadows. It's it kind of calls to her, and so she opens it, and it opens up to a library. She goes into the library, she closes the door, and she kind of wanders the library for a little bit. But the library doesn't have books in the way that we think of books. It has stories through pictures in the form of books. And she's kind of wandering through there for a little bit, but when she emerges from the door again, she's not in the same place. She's in a completely different area. And so her life goes. She ends up walking and walking and walking. Again, this is in the 1800s, so it's not like she could just fly somewhere. But this library that appears out of nowhere in the shadows of bustling cities or on the sides of mountains, it takes her different places, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be on the same continent. It can be over across the pond. And she meets some really interesting people, and she tells her story to these people. But the incredible thing about this book is that it's stories within stories. So first, yes, you have Aubrey and her puzzle ball and her disease or her sickness or whatever it is. But also you have Aubrey as she grows up and becomes less selfish and becomes a different person because of this thing that she's inflicted with. And you learn about the people she tells her story to as well. You learn about the people who are cruel to other people, and you learn about the people who are kind to other people, and people who are curious and what they'll do to satiate their curiosity. It's an incredible puzzle ball itself. And as she gets older, and it goes through her whole life, by the time this book ends, she's an old lady. It's an incredible journey. You get a sense that there has to be an end somewhere. She can't just keep going and going and going until she eventually dies of old age. But that seems to be where it's going for most of the story. She has a kind of relationship with the disease because it screams at her, or it whispers to her. When she's been in a place for too long, it tells her it's time to go. If she doesn't listen when it starts whispering to her, then it eventually starts screaming at her, and then the bloody noses start and the bones contorting start, and then she's moving again, and she's meeting new people, and she's going to new places, and she's telling her story and getting stories in return, and finding the door to the crazy library that goes everywhere. It was a really incredible story, and it does end in a way that I felt was a satisfactory ending to this crazy story. I mean, again, it's magical realism, so you have to understand that these books are supposed to be written as if all of the crazy, unusual, magical, strange, supernatural things, as if these are all normal occurrences. Of course, Aubrey isn't necessarily a normal occurrence, but her situation isn't really viewed as something supernatural. It is still considered a disease. It's still considered as something that afflicts her, that people think can be cured. Doctors have tried to cure her. She's become famous by the time she's an old lady in her own right, because people have met her and talked about her to other people who have met her. They've given her things. She's given them things. She's fallen in love a couple times. It was a really incredible book. It was I don't know that I would necessarily say that it could have been any better. No, it couldn't have been better. I did give it 4.75 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, but I'm trying to think of what exactly I felt justified it not getting a 5-star review. And maybe it's just because I'm trying to be stingy with those 5-star reviews, because I've gone through my reviews and have kind of noticed that I hand them out liberally. And even though this one ended up with 5 stars because I had to round it from 4.75 to 5 stars, it still ended up with a 5-star review. So it was an incredible book. The expected publication date is April 9th of 2024. So definitely a book worth picking up if you are into magical realism, or if you're into supernatural. It does lean a little bit towards, of course, the historical side, because it starts in the 1800s and it goes all the way into the 1900s, but it was a pretty fantastic and fantastical book. So thanks so much for watching.